So I'm here with Eduard Lewis, and he is the director of the Brit program this year, Tale of Two Cities. And we've spoken before about some of the amazing issues that are part of Tale of Two Cities. And I feel like it's sort of become the thing that people say at Tale of Two Cities, we're dealing with so much poverty. In the play, we're actually dealing with two different cities, literally. But poverty and injustice are the major themes that run throughout the play. So I thought we could talk a bit about what you think is significant about doing a play like this in modern times.
Yeah, sure. I think doing a play like A Tale of Two Cities is incredibly relevant today, actually, and it's always incredibly relevant, and it's probably why it's one of those stories that has sort of stuck within our society and is one of those sort of great literary stories. And I think the reason is because, well, I think it's twofold. I think the play and the book itself are about love, and I think they're about what happens when you find love, but more importantly, what happens when you take away love from humans and from people and from a society, and when you don't love the people who you're meant to. The aristocracy in French society, their role was to look after the serfs or the very lower classes, the working people, and they didn't. They mistreated them, and they didn't provide them with food, and neither did the king, and therefore a revolution happened. And the second thing is that I think revolution is a part of human society. It's part of what makes us human. When we find injustice or when we encounter injustice, we, as part of almost human instinct, we revolt and we stand up for what we believe in. And I think that's what happens in A Tale of Two Cities, behind the sort of the love story of Charles Darnay and Lucy and Carton. That's behind that sort of love triangle. The backdrop is this huge revolution, and I think, you know, it's incredibly relevant because you only have to look to only a few months ago with the Ferguson riots here in America, or Israel and Palestine, or the uprising in Syria, or the riots we had back in the UK a couple of years ago. It's something that is always happening in human society.
When you see injustice, you have to be able to sort of tap into that nature of ourselves that requires that we find that equilibrium of justice. And I think when we really latched on to this sort of 1% and 99%, and that was really sort of a worldwide movement, it did affect you in the UK as well. You have more of a welfare state, but it was also, and it continues to be, a major issue, and I read about it all the time on both sides of the pond. So what do you think are some of the things that maybe modern audiences could learn from a show like this? Does it help us talk about these issues in a way that we might not be able to in general conversation?
I think, there are some people that believe that theatre is a hugely political thing, and that it should be doing something to change audiences or to change their perception. I'm not necessarily of that stringent a belief, but I do believe that all theatre is political, because human life is political, and people who say they're not involved in politics are lying, because politics is everyday life and is how we run our society and how we live our lives. So with that in mind, I think it's inevitable that plays, and a play like this, will reflect the way we live and the way we lived back then and how we live now, and can hold up a mirror to our own sort of society nowadays.
We recently had Lauren Schweter-Beal here talking about the fact that we need a food revolution. And so I think we're always kind of hungry for making those kinds of changes, but we do seem rather stuck. So what do you think about that, and what are some of the changes you think we should consider when we see a show like this?
I think in terms of where we are right now in sort of the society that we live in America or in the UK, in a sort of, you might call it first world society, or in the developed world, is actually things like food and things like drink and smoking and things like that cause us damage without us realising, and I think food is a really big one, because there's so much trust we put into companies and the government about sort of where our food comes from, how it's made, what's in it, and there's very little regulation in comparison to something like tobacco or alcohol. And so I think that probably, in terms of, if you want to call it revolutions or big changes that are going to happen in our society, I think that's probably the next one.
And what can we do about these sort of structural inequities that we see that this play really delves into? What do you think we as theater goers can start to think about? I think theater teaches us about ourselves and others in a way nothing else can. And so to get that kind of dialogue going about the structural inequities that really feed into the plot of this production, what do you think about that?
To be honest, I think as long as we're discussing things like that, then that's the most important thing. And I think that's one thing that theatre does very well. And for me, I don't necessarily need to see a piece of theatre that is overtly political or specifically about the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan to then begin talking about those things. It's actually I'm more interested in seeing a human story that touches me in a way that then sparks a conversation with someone else about the way I lead my life or the way we lead our lives in society today. And for that reason, I think something like A Tale of Two Cities is great for that, because it holds up a mirror to our society without sort of being overtly explicit and saying, this is the problem with the way we lead our lives today. It's more of a open story in that sense because it's set so long ago.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, this has been really, really helpful. I think it's wonderful for us to take this time to really delve into the kinds of productions we're doing on campus and think about ways that they can be relevant to our students and faculty and community. So I appreciate you taking time with me today.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks.